Now I see it is wrong. morning, church. Make sure you please welcome some of our visitors this morning. Jonathan has some family in, I believe. And Teresa has a visitor with her this morning. Welcome them as well. Thanks for coming. I'm going to start off the service this morning, right now, rather, with prayer requests this morning. Anyone have a prayer request this morning?
I have two, Kevin. I remember the Mills family. They lost their daughter and she had 3 babies. And we're going to send a card around, and then Bill lost his uncle for babies.
Remember Rick Free, guy I work with, he's had a lot of health issues. He's been in the hospital. I don't know if he got out yet or not. He just needs a lot of prayer. He's had a lot of health issues, and he's a trooper.
Remember Gary Sparks and his family. His daughter is Kimmy Sparks. She's the young lady from West Schools that got diagnosed with leukemia last week. He works with us at the hospital, and he has 2 other children, so his wife's staying in Columbus with his daughter, and he's working and getting his other children to school, and going back and forth on his days off. So it's going to be a long road there for him. It's going to be tough.
Remember Amanda Charlton? It's been about a year that she got diagnosed with melanoma, and she was having some progress, and then she posted the other day that, I can't remember the details, but basically it's kind of deja vu. They're back to where they started a year ago with what they got to check out and what she's got to do as far as testing. So if we could get a card for her, that was Amanda Charlton. Just remember her and her family in prayer. Her husband's name's Nathan.
Michael Atkins, he had surgery Tuesday. He had a spot of cancer taken off his nose, and he had 2 masses taken off his chest, and they're benign. But just pray for him, pray for Tracy. It's hard when you have a kid who's had cancer, and then your husband goes in, and she's down right now, and she needs lifted up in prayer. And then I have 2 unspoken that need taken care of.
Our music teacher at school, Amy Bergen, her father was in an accident this week, and he has a bleeding disorder where his platelets don't know what to do when he has a trauma, so he might be clotted and be fine and then start bleeding. So it lacerated his kidney. So he's in University of Columbus, or Riverside, Columbus.
Also, a lady I work with, I requested prayer for her last week because she's supposed to went in last Tuesday for a reversal on her issue she had going on with Debbie Doss, and the doctor got some kind of virus, so she's still waiting to go back. Just remember her in prayers.
All right, anyone else this morning before we pray?
My youngest granddaughter, Rachel Pennington, is in Air Force in England, and she's been there for quite some time away from her family. Remember her in prayer. And I have a praise. We got back last night from down in Kentucky, so I'm thankful. But we had a really good time. Ryan and Sarah's wedding reception there in Lexington, or his Ryan's people. So a lot of traffic. Lexington's a big city, a lot of traffic. So we had a very good time. So I'm very thankful. God's good.
Lloyd, would you mind praying for our prayer request this morning?
God, we come to you this morning, Lord. We want to thank you for your safe travel back to your house, the house that we worship in, Lord. We want to thank you for the weather, Lord. Also, we want to thank you for each and every one that outspoke requests and the ones that didn't outspoke requests. You know everything, Lord. You know our thoughts. you know what we're thinking. And Lord, the prayer request this morning, I can't remember them all, Lord, but you know them all. And you know how they finish. Lord, there's cancer, people traveling. Just be with all the requests, Lord. Be with the Doss family, Lord, and Lord, just be with the unspoken request that was mentioned, not was mentioned. But Lord, just be with the service this morning, that we will do what you want us to do. Speak or not speak, or sing or not sing. We're here to worship you, Lord. In your name, amen.
All right, I'll start off praise this morning. I'm just thankful for the week I've had. I've had some ups and some downs and some good times, but Sarah and Brett and everyone played the song, Counting Every Blessing, and I think it goes with what Jonathan was talking about earlier this morning. Do we truly count every blessing? Sometimes we focus on the bad things that happen, and we forget all the goodness that God's given us and the things and how He provides for us. So I'm thankful for that this morning. I'm thankful for some good friends that are here that helped me out this week, Brett and Dave. And more so than them helping me out, what they don't realize is my brother who was there, who we pray for often, he gets to be surrounded by those that truly reflect Christ, and that means a lot to me.
Kevin, I got to stand up and give thanks this morning. You know, a couple weeks back, I asked people to pray, and I appreciate the ones that prayed, and about this basketball coach that I didn't think I was going to be, because they changed everything. We didn't know going into it and all that good stuff. And, well, I got the message about a week and a half ago that I was going to be coach of one team. Well, sometimes when you pray so much, I believe God sits back there and like, you know what? I'm going to give you double dose since you pray so much. And he did. He did. They needed a travel ball coach. So everybody's like, well, you look like a good man to do it. So now I'm the travel ball coach. So now I got one of my pages set up for the biddy ball. I got to set my travel ball coach page up so I can talk to the parents there. But we're small in numbers. We're small in numbers. I got 7 players on one team, and I got 6 on the travel ball team. Well, y'all know you only need 5 to play, but when you get in foul trouble, you want a bench full there to put them in. And being 3rd and 4th graders, we want to smack every time they can. So I want the church to continue praying for me for strength, first of all, because starting this week, right tomorrow, I'm busy every night of the week except Friday and Sunday. I'm going to be at the school. Either it's junior high girls basketball going on, or it's biddy ball practice, or it's travel ball practice. Saturdays, we're trying to get the travel ball games on Saturday morning, and the biddy ball games in the afternoon, to help me out a little bit there, because I don't want to play on Sunday, because that's what they wanted us to do, the travel ball team, play on Sunday, and I'm trying to stay away from that. But just pray for the kids not to get sick. I know it's hard going to school. And strength, and just get us through the season, and let's pray March gets there as fast as it can, so we can get through this basketball. But I love basketball. I'm not complaining about basketball. It's just, it's going to be a battle for me, and I know I got a good church here praying for me, and we'll get through it. And I want to give God thanks for dying on that cross for me, Kevin. And he prayed in the garden. His father, our father, could tuck him out of this world in a heartbeat. He said, you know what? Forget it. Come back home. But he didn't. He went through. He went through with the pain and the punishment and the blood and the shed and the getting up on the cross and taking a spear to the side and all of that, just for us in the future and for them back then. And people don't realize what he went through. And a college professor told Tom White one time that Jesus should have died before he even got to the cross, because he was so beaten and blooded, but he was strong enough to make it. And if God puts something on your heart this morning, please stand up and tell him what God's done for you, because he's done a lot for us. If you have a kid and your oldest kid, would you send him into enemy arms to get beaten? I want to thank God for everything this morning.
else this morning? Before Jonathan comes up this morning.
I want to praise the Lord. We met with the siding contractor. It's gonna definitely be sad to not have the word Tyvek all over our house. But I think I'll be able to handle it. And it's just, God has blessed us immensely. Right now, the truckloads are in a recession, but Brad constantly is getting calls and he's always getting loads. And so I praise the Lord for that. Every time his truck has something wrong with it, I don't know how many times we've prayed for his truck, but it's been nice. We've been able to actually make really good steps forward on getting the house done. Although I've been fine with at least living in half of it. But I'm thankful that God's providing all that we need.
You ready, John? If you could say a prayer for me this week. I've been having some physical pain. I don't think I'm sick. I just have some pain. So if you ever had that and you're trying to preach, sometimes that makes it a little interesting. So, all right, let's bow our heads for a minute. Father, thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you have done in each of our lives. What you continue to do if we will just submit to you. God, I pray that your presence will be with me today, that you will give me the wisdom and clarity to speak your truth. As each person here that you know that needs to hear it, God, I pray that your spirit will have freedom, that we will open up our hearts and our minds to your words, and most of all, that we will walk out committed to being doers of your word and not hearers only. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So this is our third and final week of More Faith in Your Phone. I thought that I was going to end it since we had a couple people in between with the missionaries and with Brad last week. I pray that some of you sent him messages telling him that you appreciated the message that he shared with us last week. But as I tried to push on without finishing, I kind of felt like the Spirit was like, no. And even this week, so I actually got to sit in a tree stand for a couple of days, which I haven't got to do very much. I'm usually with my son, which I love spending time with him, but I really like sitting in a tree stand because, number one, I can sleep because it's really comfortable, and number two, I get lots of time to read without any interruptions because, well, where I live, there is no service. There's no prayer of being able to communicate with anyone other than God. We were talking, and I just felt like the Spirit was like, well, you can do it your way if you want, but just don't ask me to be there. And I don't want to be here without him here. So we're going to finish this. Week 1, we looked at how much faith we place in our phones when it comes to direction. We follow our phones regardless wherever they tell us to go. Whether it be a cow pasture or Brackenridge, for those of you who were here when the missionary came. We make U-turns when our phone tells us to, even when there's no U-turn signs. I was talking to a friend of mine that's a trooper, and he said that you would not believe how many people make U-turns, and he pulls them over, and they're like, well, my GPS told me to turn around. We rely on our phone's timing, even though it has let us down many, many times. I don't know about you, but I never get there when Google says I should. Probably because of bathroom stops and different things, but it just never works out. We place a great deal of trust in our phones while we question God's instructions. So we will take our phone and we will trust it, but then when God gives us specific instructions, we're like, are you sure? Are you positive that that's the way? Are you
sure that I can't go ahead on the path that I'm going, that I need to turn around. We question His direction, and we question His timing. God, are you sure? I mean, this isn't in our program that we never print right now that says that we need to pray, or that we need to go shake someone's hand, or tell them that we love them, or ask them whatever help. See, many times we put way more faith in this than we do in God. The second week, as we look at our data plan and cell phone usage, we consider the amount of data we use and the number of minutes that we talk each month on our phones. We also talked about how we refuse to go anywhere without your phones. Now, show of hands, how many of you have started down the road and realized you didn't have your phone, and there is no way I could go without my phone, and turned around and went back and got your phone? Amanda, raise your hand. How many of you wish your spouse would make sure she had her phone with her whenever she was going down the road? And it was charged. Yeah. So what if we took that same commitment in using or downloading the data or reading the Bible? If you remember, I gave you the calculation that if you use more than a gig in your plan a month, if you're using more data than the Bible has in it and its written pages. What if we insisted that God was with us everywhere we went, and if He wasn't, we would go back and get on our knees and make sure He was with us before we continued, much like we make sure the phone is in our pocket. See, many times we seldom check to ensure God is present in our lives or in the direction that we're headed. So this morning we're finishing the series with week 3. And before we do that, how many of you have a smartphone? One of these. Something like this. Raise your hand real big so I can see. Alright? How many of you have something like this? Charlie? Anyone else? And Marion? Alright. I think this one's Houston's. I'm not for sure. Yeah. It's been laying up here for a while, Houston. So, how many of you don't have a phone at all? A cell phone at all?
Just got my first one. It's charging right now as I speak.
Okay. How many of you who don't have a cell phone but you have a cordless phone? Cordless phone in your house. You don't have a cordless phone either, Carolyn?
I have a landline.
But is it a cordless phone?
Does it have a cord? Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. So if you have a cell phone, whether it be one of these, or a cordless phone that I didn't bring with me, I hope that this message will apply to you, or at least that you can relate to it to some degree. But before we talk about phones, I want you to consider how much attention do you spend on a regular basis paying attention to your spiritual condition? How aware of you, or are you, of where you stand with God and the strength or the attitude, the spiritual place that you are? How aware are you of that condition? How often do you take time to consider where you are on your spiritual journey? Now, this is what I found about a lot of different things, including spiritual lives. We don't always pay a lot of attention until we're in trouble. For example, I get on the scales every day because I have to, even though they say that's not healthy, but it is because it keeps me from going through Dairy Queen twice a day. Okay? But if I don't do that, Lloyd, the clothes that typically fit me pretty well won't button anymore. And then I get on the scale and I'm like, oh, what happened? And I can tell you, Buckeye madness. Okay? But that's why, not the football, it's the yogurt or frozen custard, okay? That's what happens. But so many times we do that. You know what? This year we took Amanda's car to get her tires changed. I knew with the mileage that her tires probably needed changed. We had just came back from North Carolina with my family. And I was taking it, what we were actually doing was a fitment test because I was getting wheels and tires. And the lady said, yeah, we're going to give you a loaner tire because your tires are really, really bad. I was like, what? Well, the part that I could see wasn't that bad. But I walked out there and guess what? There was wires hanging out of the tires and all kinds of stuff coming out of it from all of our lovely potholes. that my wife hits on a regular basis. But you know what? I don't crawl under the top car and look at that. But guess what? Because it happened, or if a blowout would have happened, then I would have paid attention. And what I find is a lot of times in our lives, we are much like that in our spiritual life. When something happens and we realize that we're really down, that we're not where we used to be, then we start looking and start thinking about it. But the question is how often do we regularly consider where we're at in our spiritual walk? How aware are we of things in our lives that are spiritually draining us? How often are we aware of the things that are just pulling us down? You know, we wait until we're at the bottom, and then a lot of times we're like, how did we get here? And then we have to start doing inventory. Well, I'm not doing this. I started doing this, and this is happening, and that's happening. But how aware are we of the things that are draining us or pulling us down? And how quick are we to limit or eliminate the amount of exposure that we have to those things? How much effort do we place in becoming spiritually recharged? When you realize you're becoming spiritually drained, how insistent are you on being recharged at that particular moment? You say, Jonathan, what does this have to do with cell phones? Well, it doesn't make any difference if you have one of these, or a cordless phone. One thing that we can all agree on is if the battery is dead, the phone is useless. You know what? We spend a great amount of time and focus on making sure that this thing is charged. Why? Because it's our lifeline. We put so much faith and confidence in this. We need this, and if the battery is dead, we know that we're in trouble. Because, well, as you heard at the beginning of this series, you don't have directions, you don't have addresses, you don't have a way to communicate. And if you're me, you have no idea what you're supposed to be doing that day. You know, sometimes, a little moment of truth here, I have this cord that I say is my cord and no one else is ever allowed to use it by my bed because, I don't know about you, but charge cords play great disappearing acts at our house. I mean, I can go buy a 5-pack of them and in 5 weeks, they're all gone. It's like, I'm pretty sure the mice and the ladybugs that we have must eat the things, right? But I have one plugged right in, and it's an iPhone charger and an iPhone cord. And the other day, I had a pretty busy schedule. And I was going to be driving a dump truck that I knew didn't have a charger in it. So, like I do every night, I plug my phone in. The problem is I didn't look to see if the little lightning bolt was on. I didn't look to make sure the other part was still plugged into the wall. And guess what? It wasn't. Because someone else in my family decided they were going to plug their mobile or electronic device into that. So when I woke up in the morning, I got this little symbol that showed a dead battery with the charge cord needed. And it messed me up. Because I didn't have a way to charge my phone, Tommy, in a vehicle that I was in. But what if we just spent that kind of effort or put that kind of emphasis on making sure that we were spiritually charged on a regular basis? It's important that we're aware of where we are with Christ daily in our walk with Him. I would guess the majority of you could name someone who you recognize as a dedicated follower of Christ who one day just announced that they were walking away. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm done. And you sit there and you're like, how did that happen? How could someone just overnight leave? Can I tell you something? It didn't happen overnight. What happens is they didn't put their effort or any effort in observing their spiritual condition. They didn't take a lot of time of seeing where they were, and they just kept going down and down and down. And then eventually something happened, and it was like those 3 obnoxious beeps right before the phone just goes dead. And their spiritual lives is like, what happened? How did I get here? I was talking to a guy that was a pastor just not very long ago. And he's in a pretty bad spot. And he said, Jonathan, I just don't know how I got here. And I looked at him and I said, I can tell you. Of course, he didn't want to hear that, right? Because it was someone else's fault. But I said, when did you stop reading? When did you stop praying? When did you stop being accountable to other people? All the things that we've been talking about in our CrossFit series and all this. When did you just stop? He looked at me and he said, I don't know, but it's been a while. That's how it happens. See, we have to pay attention. We have to be aware of where we are. We have to make sure that we are walking with Christ, that we are remaining spiritually strong. So this morning I want us to consider the attention that we place on the battery life of our phone and recharging our phones, and just think about that and apply that to our spiritual life. My guess is the vast majority of you could tell me, give or take 10% of what charge your battery life is right now on your cell phone. I know my son can because he tells me on a regular basis. Dad, I just charged my phone and it's only been an hour and it's dead and I don't understand why. I can understand why, because you haven't put the thing down in the entire time, right? But most of you have a pretty good idea of what the charge is on your cell phone right now. You have a pretty good idea of where it stands, how long it will last, and how quickly you will need to plug it in to something else. In fact, I would guess that the vast majority of you check multiple times a day, look at it to see if it's yellow or green or red, and it's instantly, man, I got to plug in. I got to get plugged in. But how often do we go through life and say, God, where are we? How often do we join David in the prayer and say, search me, O Lord. Let me know if there's any problems. Let me know if there's any evil way or wicked way in me. Give me the path that I have to walk. How often do we do that? Why are we so conscious of our battery life on our phone? Because it's our lifeline. And we know that without a charge, that phone is useless in our lives. How much different would our walks be with Christ if we gave our spiritual lives the same kind of attention that we give our phones? Did you know that there is more than 60 passages in the Bible that address us being watchful and ready? One of those is in Luke 21, and I want to read that to you. Luke 21, verses 34 through 36 says this, "But watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that day will come upon you suddenly like a trap. But watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that day will come to you like a trap. For it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the whole earth. But stay awake at times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and stand before the Son of Man." What's it say there? It starts out and says, but watch yourselves, be aware, be alert, pay attention of where you're at, lest your hearts be weighed down. You know, a lot of times we lose focus of where it is. And I don't know about you, but there are times where I forget to check my phone, and I'm wondering, I'm like, man, they were supposed to call me, and I look, and it's like, yeah, they probably did try to call me. They're saying, listen, pay attention, be alert, watch yourselves. You know what? If you haven't heard from the Spirit, if the Spirit's not dealing with you, it's probably because you walked away from Him a while back and you need to turn around and go back to where He's at. That says, watch yourselves, stay awake, stay alert, and then pray. Stay in communication with that. So first of all, I want to ask you, listen, how alert are you? Do you pay more attention to your phone and your battery status, your charge status of your phone, than you do with your relationship with God? Because just like you can get in trouble if this goes dead, you can get in greater trouble if you spiritually are disconnected from God. The next part, this morning I want you to take a few minutes and apply the knowledge that you have to maintaining the charge on your phone to maintaining your spiritual lives. First, there's not a person here that wouldn't acknowledge the necessity of a cell phone's battery being charged in order for the phone to be useful. Just as we understand a cell phone is useless without a charge, we too must acknowledge the same certainly is true with us in our relationship with Christ. John 15:5 says this, I am the vine and you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Without being plugged in, without being empowered by the Spirit, guess what? We can't do anything. But how often do we remain disconnected, or we'll go until we recognize that we are in a really bad place before we check our spiritual condition. Second, we have to be aware of the things that are spiritually draining us. My guess is many of you could give advice on which apps drain your battery. In fact, if you go into some of the settings, it's very easy to say, listen, I only want this to be draining me while it's being used, and the rest of the time don't. You know that if you have certain apps on, like location apps and different things, that it's draining your battery. If you're like me and you forget to turn your flashlight off and you just stick it in your pocket, guess what? It drains your battery. But you can tell me things, and you can tell me, give me advice on things that can save my battery life, that keeps it from draining so quickly. And in the same way, it's true in our spiritual life. There are things in our lives that are just spiritually draining. And there's advice. If you're sitting there and you're like, man, I am so down, there are people in here that can give you specific advice. Well, are you doing this? Are you not doing this? Is this? And I'm not preaching on stuff. I'm preaching on recognizing the things in your life that spiritually drain you. There are people that when I'm around them, they spiritually drain me. You're like, well, you should. None of you. Well, maybe. Just kidding. But they're just people that I can only take so much. And my dad had a hat, and I've kind of taken it as a theme. I love everyone. It's just some people I love somewhere else. I mean, it's just that way. But what if we were so aware? You know, I go through and regularly shut off the apps. How many of you do that? You open it up and just say, I don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. You're just closing everything. Why? Because you don't want it draining your battery. What if we would do that in our spiritual life and said, listen, this is garbage right now. This is fluff. I don't need this. This is draining me, and I don't have time for that. My spiritual life can't suffer because I have that running right now, so I'm removing it. I'm turning it off. I'm limiting my exposure to that at this particular time. Hebrews chapter 12 tells us that. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which so clings so closely. This is the ESV, for those of you who are saying, well, that doesn't sound like the ones I usually read. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Now listen, this year we have heard a lot about running, okay? Things other than from bears, right? Okay? But I'm pretty sure when you watch Eli and you watch Josh and you watch Teresa jogging down 348 and whoever else is crazy enough to run, when you watch them running, they're not carrying backpacks and all those things. Why? They're shedding it off, okay? And things are aside. I was looking at a pair of shoes the other day, and it was practice shoes that were heavy, running shoes that were like, they looked like socks to me. I was like, I don't even think I would want to run anywhere in these things. Why? Because they have a goal that they're reaching, and they are removing every single thing. They are turning off every single thing that could hold them or could draw them down or drain them spiritually. What if we paid that same kind of attention in our spiritual lives and said, listen, it's not that this thing is right or wrong. It's not that it's a problem or not a problem, but it's just not something that I need, and I need to remove it. Why? Because I want to stay focused and I want to stay charged and in a relationship with God. Third, I'm guessing if your phone was dead this morning, the majority of you, probably after you got done with the initial panic, would not hesitate to ask someone to borrow their charger. In fact, I'm guessing that the vast majority of you know someone in our church right now that has a phone similar to yours that you could charge it. And you ask on a regular basis. Hence, the missing charge cables all the time. I know that Ben is not yet converted to the good side. And there is no reason for me to ask him to borrow a phone charger because, well, he's one of those Android users. Now, he says he's a Christian. But I know I can ask him. But I know I can go to the Marshalls and I can go to the Wilsons and several other people that have iPhones, and I can say, hey, can I borrow your charger? A lot of times I don't even take my charger with them if I'm with those people because I know they'll have 2 or 3 if there's just 2 of us in the car because they have something that every member of their family can plug in. Now, think about this. What if we were so readily willing to go to someone and say, listen, I am just spiritually drained right now, and I need you. I need you to come alongside me. I need you to hold me accountable. I need you to pray with me and to pick me up. I need you to give me advice on the things that I should be doing and the things I shouldn't be doing, and maybe the things that I should be removing from my life that has got me into this place to begin with. In Ecclesiastes 4, we know that it tells us two are better than one, and a threefold cord is not easily broken. But this morning, I want to look in Hebrews chapter 10. And in this passage, we hear it used all the time about attending church. You know, not to forsake the assembling of yourselves together. I'm going to read it, but we hear that, and we're like, oh yeah, that's the one about telling me, beat me over the head, telling me I need to be at church. But this morning, I want you to read it without any preconceptions. I want you to listen to it. It says, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. Not neglecting to meet together as in the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as we see the day drawing near. Can I just tell you this? Let us consider how we can recharge, how we can spiritually lift up each other with love, or to do love and good works, not neglecting meeting together as in the habit of some, but encouraging one another. What? Recharging each other. Even more as we see the day approaching. You know, I hear a lot of people that use this passage and beat people over the head and say, you need to come to church. You need to come to my church because you haven't been here for so many weeks. But listen, is their church stirring them up to love and good works? Is it encouraging them, or do they leave more discouraged when they come? I'm like, listen, maybe they should use that same passage and say, well, I came the last 3 months and I was never stirred to do love or good works, and I definitely wasn't encouraged. But listen, that's just a side extra message for you, okay? I could preach a while on that one. But how long has it been since you went to someone and said, man, my phone is dead. Can I just borrow your charger just for a minute? And how long has it been that you went to someone spiritually and said, man, I am really struggling. Will you just join with me in prayer? Will you help me? Will you help me to get back to where I need to be? Will you help me to do this thing that I need to do? Hey, I'm going through something right now that is draining me. And while I'm going through that, will you just join with me in prayer so that I can keep charged? I'm facing something. I got to go talk to someone. I'm praying for something. I'm going through this situation right now, and I need help. Will you be there with me? Can I borrow that extra charge from you so that I can remain where I need to be spiritually? This morning, I want you to consider your spiritual condition. Where are you? Where would you relate this morning and say, listen, man, I am charging right now. It's like my life is going good, or it's already been going good. I'm fully charged, or man, look at the yellow eye. It's been better, but I'm okay. I'll make it. Or maybe my battery is dead. I don't even have the strength to plug myself back in, and I just need help. Maybe this morning you're thinking, you just can't do it anymore. Can I remind you, you don't have to. It's when we recognize our weaknesses that we can understand His strength. It's when we recognize, hey, I can't do this. This life is hard. Can I tell you something? It is hard. And if someone says, oh, you're saved now, everything's good, they're lying. Okay? Jesus said something very different than that. This morning, if you feel like you can't go anymore, understand this, you don't have to. All you have to do is allow Him to refill you and to plug into Him. Maybe you feel like you're just spiritually drained. Ask Him to show you what's draining you. Ask Him to show you what's pulling you down so that you can eliminate that issue. Maybe this morning you don't even feel like you have the energy to ask God for help. Listen, that's what we're here for. Grab a friend and ask them to help you. Ask them to come alongside you, pray with you, to help you become restored. Listen, there is no shame in needing restored or recharged. The problem occurs is when we fail to recognize how low we are, or that our battery is completely dead, that it becomes a problem. In Mark 6, you will find an example of Jesus' disciples failing to recognize their need to be recharged. And you'll find Jesus acknowledged their necessity, or the necessity for them to do so. So in Mark 6, it says this, in verses 7 through 13, you'll find that Jesus sent his disciples out in groups of 2. And they were doing some amazing things. They were healing people, and they were casting out demons, and doing all kinds of crazy things. That was just awesome. If you read that and skip down to verse 30, you'll find the disciples returning to Jesus, and they were telling him about all the things that they had saw, and all the things that they had taught, and all the things that they had accomplished. Jesus sat down and he said, listen, I want to hear it all. Just tell me, oh, that's good, that's good. Keep going. No, that's not what he said. In verse 31, I want to read it to you because this is what it says. It says, this was Jesus' response. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest for a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. Man, that is never going to be said of Hill's Chapel. We eat all the time. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Listen, this morning, can I just tell you something? There is a time that you need for recharging. Now, he didn't tell them, you're done, you're retired, you don't have to do this anymore. He didn't tell them, he wasn't sitting there excited about all the things that they were doing. Can I give you some insight? Jesus is more concerned about your spiritual health than he is the work that you're doing. And here's all these people coming in, the 12 people that he chose to change the world. And they came in and started telling him all these things. They were so busy, so caught up in what they were doing. They didn't even take time to eat. And he's like, okay, that's all good. Now you need recharge. You need a trip. You need some time with me. And they got on a boat and they went off where they spent some time with Christ. And you know what? Some of us get so caught up in running around doing all the different things. This morning I had like 6 messages that were 6 different tasks that someone was asking me to do today that wasn't on my schedule until 8 o'clock this morning. But you know what? I was sitting there and I started Tommy worrying about it, and I was like, man, I don't even have time to pray this morning. Knowing what the message was going to be, I was like, I don't have time not to. Listen, can I just tell you this morning, if you feel like you are not where you've been spiritually, if you feel like that you are just drained, maybe your battery is not fully charged, it's probably because you're not spending time with Christ. And in our church, I want you to do work. And I believe that we are called to be the hands and feet of Christ and not the tails of Christ sitting on a pew. But it is important that if you're going to do that work, that you do that, spend the time with Him here. He didn't say, go shopping. He didn't say, go do these different things. He said, let's go to a desolate place. They got on a boat with Christ and spent some alone time focusing on their spiritual relationship. So where are you on your spiritual journey today? Are you fully charged? Are you in low power mode where things are on and off and on and off? Are you completely dead? This morning, Jesus is inviting you to stop trying to do it on your own and to allow Him to recharge you. He gives you the opportunity through His Word, His love letter that He wrote to us. He gives you the opportunity to talk to Him in accessibility all the time. We have to understand as a church, He doesn't put nearly as much importance on your accomplishments as He does your time with Him. And can I tell you, if you're not spending time with Him, you're not going to accomplish much for the Kingdom. You know why? You have a limited battery life without being recharged. So how much time are you taking to read? And you're like, oh, here comes the guilt trip. No, I'm just asking. You know, one of the things, and I love to hunt, but you know one of the things that I love is, man, I get some unrestrained, uninterrupted, unless a buck comes by, time is reading Scripture. Talking to me. Like, that's weird. Yeah, that's what all the animals think. That might be why I haven't killed one for a while. But just sitting there and just thanking God. The other day, it was the first time in probably 4 years that I sat in the tree stand. And it was awesome. A buck come up and licked my tree. I'm like, that is crazy. But you know what the amazing thing was? Is I remembered in 2013 when I sat there and thought everything was all right before I was sick. And it wasn't. But now I can sit there and think, it doesn't matter if everything's all right. Because God is good. And He is in control. And listen, I felt like shouting here, like, that's weird. That's why I like to hunt. I like to kill stuff too. But I like to just sit there and spend time with Him. That's my desolate place. That's the time where I can focus on Him. It's an amazing thing to do. I can tell you that it is a time of recharging. But I can't wait for the few months out of the year that's that way. I've got to spend time in His Word. Listen, I'm not against Caleb, and I know some of you get blessed through Caleb, but I got to hear his Word. I got to listen to it, and not just other people preaching, but just listen to His Word. I got to take some time and turn that off and just talk to it. Why? Because the life is draining. There are things that will pull you down every day, and you've got to remain plugged in, or you're not going to make it. And if you're not plugged into Him after a limited time, guess what? This phone's been laying up here for a year. It's got to be charged before it's worth anything other than a paperweight. And it's the same way in our lives. You can only not be plugged into Him for so much time before you're drained. This morning, I just invite you to think about it, to examine in yourself and think about where you stand and think about the last time that you spent some quality time with you and God without any other repercussions or without any other prerequisites or things that was dependent on that time that you spent. And I'm going to tell you something. If it's been a while, I can tell you where your spiritual battery is. And it's not very good. I'm going to ask you to stand, if you will, if Brett and Sarah will come. You say, well, listen, if I go up there, they're going to think I'm in some bad spiritual place. No, they're going to think you just have enough sense to recognize your battery's not where it's supposed to be. You're needing charge. Zachary was telling me, and you know, I don't know how many of you have teenagers, but cell phones is like a daily conversation. Is that me? Yep. That's Skillet Victorious. But it's a regular thing because he has an iPhone 5. Everyone feels sorry for him. But he's like, my battery life's no good, and he's wanting an XR because it has 24 hours of battery life. Whoever tested that didn't have a teenager, I can tell you that. But that's a conversation we have all the time. How much greater would my relationship with Christ be if me as His son had that kind of conversation with Him? God, I need you more. I need more battery life. I need more spiritual empowerment. I need you speaking into me on a regular basis. I don't know why we had to do week 3 of this series, but I believe some of you do. Maybe right now, when you think about your spiritual life, you have your checklist of all the things that you've been doing. You're the disciples coming back, talking about all the successes that you've had. So busy that you don't even have time to eat. Okay, that's not happening here. So busy that you don't have time to do praying and studying and just communion with God. And this morning He's just saying, listen, that's all good, but we just need a desolate place. We need a time with me and you, some focused time on me and you, in my Word, in prayer life. We need some time where you just sit and thank God for what He's done. Next month is 6 years that I was diagnosed with cancer. I can be thankful that I'm still here. I am thankful. Zachary smoked a deer yesterday. That was an experience that I would have never got the privilege of experiencing. But as I was sitting there this week, I thought in the past 6 years how many lives God has used cancer to touch. I can list them all. 22 people that I know that I personally went and ministered to with leukemia because I had leukemia. 6 of those I know of went on to their reward. 4 of those of the 6 I know committed their life to Christ because of our conversations. Many of the other ones are in a relationship with God that they never experienced before. Listen, if I got so busy about all the things that we have to do without taking time, Lord, to just thank God for that, I would be spiritually drained. And there are times in my life that I am spiritually drained. Why? Not on my knees. Not in the Word like I should. You're like, well, you should be in the Word all the time. Oh, I am. But you know what? My study time for message prep isn't time for him to talk to me like just personal, private time. It's not that desolate place where he's just saying, Jonathan, this is for you. This isn't for Hills Chapel. This isn't for Star. This is for you. If you're not getting that, you're missing out on a big part. You're going through life much like this. You have the functionality, you just don't have the power. You have the ability, you just don't have the resources. This morning, if you're one of those people and the Spirit is dealing with you, can I tell you something? Zachary was telling me that there's this charger now that you can plug in, and in minutes you can be restored. In our spiritual life, it's called on your knees, asking for help. I'm going to ask Brad if he will to go ahead and sing. And if anyone has a need this morning, I'm going to ask you to come.
You all know this prayer. We sang it last Sunday morning, actually, I think. But I've seen John 15 come up, and it's, that's what it's about. So join with me and sing this, please.